Are we all on board? Is anyone lost? I hope I'm not speaking to myself. A lot have been said.
We
Are
are
we still
together.
following? All right, thank you, Michael. Okay, so now we've been able to understand the organization as a whole, the structure and everything. When we did our SWOT, PESTO, and all of that, to understand this environment, this terrain that this business is playing with. We understand it. We know their strength. We know their weakness. We know their environment, political environment, technological terrain. We know all of those things, right? We've been able to come inside to elicit those requirements, their pain points, what the issue is from our stakeholders. We've been able to come inside to ask questions, right? We've asked questions using different techniques, right? Because we want to get to solving that issue, right? Now we've elicited what we have. Now we have to capture requirements. Remember, your requirements is like a grocery list that you take. Probably you want to prepare a salad. You document the different veggies that you want, your requirements. That's grocery list, the shopping list. You document it, then go to the supermarket, shop for those resources, come home, then implement it. Implement it means cook it, right? Cook it and make the salad. Even after making the salad, you still test it whether it makes sense, right? Have I done the salad well? Is the cream too much? And all of that. You test it and adjust where it needs to be. I need to add more veggies. I need to add more cream, right? So that's how the same way it applies in business analysis. Having met with your stakeholder to understand their need, they want to do salad, right? You understand the root cause that, oh, the root cause at the end of the day is to provide for us to be able to provide a good salad, right? Now, how do we go about providing the good salad, right? For us to go about providing good salad first, we need to capture the ingredients for it correctly. And the ingredients can be gotten from those elicitation session, right? They are telling you that this place is bad, this place needs adjustment, our sales team cannot do this, we cannot even check the customers that we have. All of those things, you are capturing it. Now, it brings us to these capturing requirements, meaning for you to even analyze anything that the stakeholder has said, right? You need to um, be able to capture those requirements, right? And hence, requirement analysis will allow you to understand what they need and what you want in order for your project to be a success, right? So for you to ensure that whatever solution they are profiling becomes a success, you need to be able to capture those requirements, that is, capture them, then analyze it. You know, we've been able to elicit it. We said we'll go back to the stakeholder to validate whether it's correct. Once they say it's correct, then we'll now analyze it. We've documented it, we've captured it well. We might have to rejig the overall information because they were just conversing. It was conversation before. Now we have to write it in a way that makes sense, right? As requirements. Those are called stakeholder requirements. We write it in a way that makes sense to everyone before we can proceed to analyze it. So why do we need to capture our requirements well in a proper way, right? Before we profile solution? Because sometimes someone might suggest something. Look at the analogy on the screen. What marketing suggested, right? That is what they suggested, this kind of swing. Now, what marketing approved was this single swing. Then it got to the engineer, and the engineer designed something like this, right? Probably did a sketch of something like that. You notice that the requirement is changing as you move along. Then at the end of the day, someone built a swing that looks like this. After building a swing that looks like this, the person that was meant to install the swing installed it in this fashion, right? How it was installed. And at the end of the day, what the customer actually wanted is a swing with this tire. That's what the customer wanted. So the person that engaged the customer in the first place, or our customers, we thought they would want a swing like this, and marketing is saying this is the kind of swing. Okay, we can't do 3-step swing, let's do 1-step swing. And at the end of the day, we created whatever we need to create. It's not meeting what the customer wants, because the customer just wants this should I call it a tire swing or what? A wheel swing, right? So the essence of requirement specification for us to be able to specify the right requirement that is going to provide value to our customers. Note, our customers might not just be external customers, they might be internal customers. So, for example, I mentioned that the leave process is bad. For you to request for leave is going to go through multiple hands, right? At that point, your customer are those staff using the leave process, right? They are internal staff, right? And they are still your customers. They are the customers of the process. They are the end user of the process, right? So your customers can be internal or external. Your end user can be internal or external, right? Those people that you are solving the solution for might be internal to your organization or external. Why do project now fail when we've realized all of these things, right? Why does it fail? 60% to 80% of projects will fail because of poor requirements gathering and analysis. So some people will not gather the full requirement, so you are missing a lot of things in your requirements. You've documented things, but you didn't document it holistically all that needs to be done, right? Also, sometimes the analysis of it, you've misinterpreted some of those requirements, right? Hence the need for you to validate those requirements with your stakeholder. You need to be able to go back to them. This is what you said the issue was. Have I documented it correctly, right? So for project that fails, right, it typically leads there are 9 reasons that usually result in it. There might be more, but you can effectively group them into 9 things, right? Poor definition of requirements, ineffective communication. If you are not communicating well, right, people are not even understanding what you mean, what you are trying to achieve. So ineffective communication, lack of handover process, meaning you've documented something and when you get it to engineering. Remember this slide, right? The handover of those requirements from marketing to engineering to people that built it and the installation of it. It keeps changing, right? So the handover of the information, there's an issue there. Requirements are not properly handed over to the next person that needs to implement it. Cross strategic alignment, lack of sponsor involvement. So even if the executive of the organization are not interested in the project, they don't give buy-in. They won't pay attention to it. They might not dedicate resource towards it. They will keep picking from your engineers, from the people that you think that you use to implement that project. They will pick them and use them to implement other projects, stalling your own project, right? So you need sponsor involvement, which is that number 4. Strategic alignment. You have to align it to the overall strategy of the organization. That's why we needed to understand those pest, most, and all of that we did initially, pest analysis, SWOT analysis, because you need to align whatever solution you are preferring to the overall strategy of the organization. You have to manage risks properly and also poor planning. You might have documented it, but you planned it all wrong, right? A project that you know will definitely take 6 months, you are saying you will do it in 3 months. So you have shrunk a lot of things together. You are in a hurry, you are not doing things properly, right? Remember, if you want it um if you want it done on time, you might sacrifice quality, right? So people are sacrificing quality because of timeline, right? So you have to plan properly. Long time to delivery. Also, if it's a very long time to delivery, people might lose interest in it. Scope creep. We'll talk about this scope creep in full later on, right? So what is a requirement? Like I said, it's like your shopping list or grocery list of the intended solution that you want. So a requirement is a statement that identify a necessary attribute, right? Whatever attribute, whatever capability, whatever characteristics or quality of a system, right? For it to have a value to the end user, then it's called a requirement. Okay, I'll take questions soon. Just hold on that, right? So whatever you need a system to be able to is called a requirement. For example, on this Zoom, right, we have end call or leave call. A requirement shows the characteristics or attributes, right? So a requirement can be, I require that there should be an end button or a leave call button, in that when I click on it, I should be able to exit the meeting, right? That's a capability or an attribute of that system we've described. I want to have a mute button that I can use to mute and unmute myself and speak in meetings, right? That's a characteristics, capability, or attribute of a system that we've defined. And it will always provide value to the user, meaning that I want to be able to mute that button so that no one would hear me, or mute myself so that I can speak. That's the value, so that you can stop people from hearing you, or speak out so that people will hear you. To leave the call so that you can leave the call or exit the call at your desired time. That's the value that that particular capability is providing for the end users. And that's a requirement in a nutshell, right? Anything that you can write down, a statement that will identify an attribute of a system, right? For it to have a value, it must provide a value to the user. Then it's called a requirement, right? It describes what is wanted and what it will do. What do you want? And what will, if we fulfill that thing that you want, what will it do? What value will it provide? So anything in that line is called a requirement, right? So when you're these are just common words that you see in the requirement. I want to be able to evaluate, I want to be able to check, I want to be able to dictate, I want to be able to report, validate, authorize, ask, and all of that, right? So all of those things are like requirement statements when you are capturing your requirements. Now we will go quickly to prioritizing requirements. I know we've exceeded our 1 hour call, but I'll just rush through this. So for requirements, it's not all requirements that you do at the same time, right? You have to be able to prioritize them. Which one should we do now and which one can we do later? Hence the Moscow technique. You can research about this Moscow technique. Must have, should have, could have, won't have. Must have is that this requirement, we must always have it. We can't do without it. We need to implement it now. Should have, we can implement it later on. The system will still function without it. Could have is nice to have. You just want to have a fancy button for logout, right? It's a could have. It does not necessarily impart anything. Won't have are those things that we won't have at all in the system. Probably we are not integrating AI for now, right? So that's typical Moscow, right? Your must have, your should have, your could have, your won't have. When you have the recordings, you can pause this slide and read through it. It's basically what I just described now. Fundamental requirements must have, requirements that can more easily be left out your could have, requirements that might not be directly met by the solution. You can have a workaround, should have, they are just nice to have, should have. They won't have, you have agreed that you won't have it on your solution. At the end of the day, after documenting these requirements, right, you require your sign off. Remember, I said you have to go back to the stakeholder to validate it. After validation, you need them to sign off so that it becomes a binding document that this is what you've said, these are the problems we've been able to identify, and this is how we are going to fix it going forward. These are the requirements that we are going to implement to fix it going forward, and hence the sign off. Even from the beginning of your documentation and elicitation process, you should already know those stakeholders that need to sign off. So that might be determined by whatever process that is within the organization, those people that needs to sign off. Now, scope creep are those things that people bring in after you've signed off that document. They now start bringing additional requirements. Oh, we remember that you have to do this. We remember this. All those things will lead to scope creep. Scope creep meaning that we are creeping out of the actual scope that we've defined before. The boundary that we've defined that we want to fix before, you are now creeping out of it to include other things, right? So you have to avoid scope creep, right? I might share some of this slide alongside the recording so that you can just go through it, right? Or I pick it up in next class. So how to avoid scope creep. You can pause this part on your end also and just read through. So from next class, we'll be looking at process design. This one is much more hands-on, much more practical. After documenting your requirements and everything, we've captured the requirements, we've elicited it, those things we need from stakeholder and those things we need to implement to solve the solution, right? To solve for the problem, I mean, right? Now, what do we do with all of these things that we've gathered? How do we get to the actual solution? So we start from process design in our next class, right? So questions, please, before we call it a day. I'm sure we can unmute our mic, right? Yeah, I'm going to drop the slide. Any question? You can unmute if you can. All right, then. So it's a simple process of understanding your organization. You know, you are solving for problems, needs, changes, whatnot in your organization as a business analyst. You are either profiling how to tap into opportunities or you are profiling how to solve a problem, right? So you need to understand it from a strategic level. What does our organization do? What are our values? What do we align by? Then you meet with your stakeholder. Okay, now this process, this issue that you are having, let me understand it, right? You ask your questions and everything. Then you document it in a way that makes sense, validate it with them. After validating it and documenting it in a way that makes sense, get their approval, their sign off that all of this is binding, right? We've gotten their sign off. Now, after getting their sign off, there will still be scope creep. Oh, we forgot this and that. So, if you want to include that scope creep, you have to analyze the impact of getting those new requirements into what we've agreed before. It's like a contract. We've agreed on so thing, we've signed contract. Then you now want to add another thing. We have to know the impact on the existing contract. Will it change the timeline of the overall project? Will it cause a lot of things to change? Will it spoil some things? Can we include it or we keep it till the next time we are doing another project, right? So all of those things you analyze before accepting any changes, right? But they are called scope creep. When you keep adding things outside of the initial scope, it can lead to scope creep. Then after getting those requirements signed and approved, then we have to now move on to process design. From the process design, we can now ideate how to, it's like solutioning. Now we want to solution for it, right? We've understand the problem, we've understand what they want. How do we now solution? How do we prefer solution to those things? That is what we'll be looking at from the next class. Thank you so much. It seems there's no question. So we can call it a day. Thank you, everyone. Do have a restful evening. Okay, let me just quickly answer this. We are done with the class. Michael says, who has the final say before and after the sign off? So before the sign off, right, the project um, is being given the go ahead by your project sponsor. So it might be the head of marketing that says, oh, we need to rejig some things. It might be the head of HR, whoever started it or whoever is driving it, that I have this issue, right? I need you to solve it for us, becomes your project sponsor. It can be sponsored by the CFO, it can be sponsored by the MD of the organization, right? So they have the initial say. But once you start documenting things, approving things, gathering those requirements, the sign off usually follow a process approved within the organization. So, for example, they will tell you for you to approve these requirements that you've documented, the head of your team leader has to approve it first. It goes to your head of department, then it goes to the head of marketing. Everyone that is impacted by the change will go to the head of their department to sign. So let's say head of marketing, head of sales, head of procurement will sign. Then the final one will go to head of technology, the guy that is going to be the head of department of the development team, right? Those developers is going to sign that yes, he's aware of this change that is coming, right? Probably the last person that will sign might be probably your head of QA, so that they are aware of it, or compliance, right? At the end of the day, all of them sign, and that document becomes a contract, right? Like it's binding. So it depends on the organization, the process that have been defined for signing a those requirements, right? It depends on the organization. So that requirement is usually documented in the form called a business requirement document, right? So you can research that online. Business requirement document, BRD, right? I hope that answers your question. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.